We are now live. So good morning, everybody. For those of you that are watching it live, it's now 11:15 on Thursday, the 11th of February. My name is Matthew Dashper-Hughes. I'm from Sandler Training, and I'm here with Ian Kelsall from Insight 6, and we are here to have what has been billed as a no-holds-barred conversation, debate, argument, hopefully something heated, hopefully something interesting will come out of it, about customer experience, customer service, CX, that kind of thing, how that translates into the whole selling process, and what that even looks like in this brave new world of doing so much online and on Zoom. So Ian, do you want to just give everybody about, 60 seconds, 90 seconds on what you do and what customer experience even is?
Sure. Yeah. So as you say, from Insight 6, we are customer experience specialists. So we work with our clients and our customers to try and get them to get more customers, keep more customers, and fundamentally sell more stuff to them. So I won't go through all the way we do that, but that's our mission and our aim. And we work across all different sectors, so professional services, retail, hospitality, education, you name it. The word customer is interchangeable with clients, patients, members, students, diners, guests, you name it. And you mentioned about customer experience. What is customer experience? Customer experience really is how do people feel about using your business? You know, what kind of emotional response do you collect? And the whole customer journey is from the point that they drive past your advert on the roundabout or read about the magazine, to the point when they're actually enjoying your products and services. It's that whole journey from the point they become aware of you, hopefully, to when they become a client of yours and they're starting to pay you money for goods and services.
Absolutely. Hopefully they introduce you to more of their friends, family and loved ones that will also then become further happy clients.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah, makes a ton of sense. Excellent. So let's have a look at this then. How's this all changing in this current world? Because I mean, there's a lot going on, and I know that's a big question. We can be talking business to business, business to consumer, and all those good things. But just from your point of view, what have been your observations about the changes in this over the course of the last 10, 11, 12 months?
Sure. I think lockdown has been blamed for a lot of advancements. So they talk about the digital adoptions moved forward 5 years in the space of 5 months. I think it's done the same thing with customer experience. People have had to start to think about their customer journey. You know, you've got restaurants that used to have people queue up at the front, get shown to a table, given a menu, etc. That's all changed. People that used to do big food deliveries have now got click and collect services going as well. So that whole journey, that whole experiential piece has changed because businesses have had to look at the way that they serve their customers, albeit from a safety perspective with COVID, but also from how do you keep people or customers confidence in the services that you're providing? How do you know that you're going to keep them safe? You know, how do you know that you're going to become a great place to visit or shop or a great place to work even? So COVID has really made businesses start to think about their customer journey. Yes, from a safety point of view, but by the same token, how can you operate safely but still provide a level of experience that makes customers want to come back and then come back and come back and to your point, become advocates to say to other people, I know you're looking for a great place to get a cup of coffee or to see a show or even a great place to do your will or maybe sell your house. I suggest you go to this business because I've used them and they're brilliant. So that advocacy you can get from looking after your customers and clients really only comes from kind of CX really, and not from a static or a stale process.
Interesting. If you wouldn't mind, could you mind if I just drill into one point that you made there? About it also being a great place to work. It strikes me that quite a lot of people, they think about the customer experience, and when they start thinking about customer journeys, it can be very much from, what does it look like from a customer's point of view? But ultimately there's two sides of the coin here. You don't have a great customer experience without having a great workplace experience and a great colleague experience. Yeah. How has that changed over the course of the last year or so?
Again, really good point. It all starts with people. As I said before, the digital automation has come on leaps and bounds. People are processing their way out of trouble, AIing themselves out of trouble, and investing in tech, and all of that stuff is good. That really is good. But actually, the biggest difference that most businesses can make is around people, and that starts with the employees and the people that work within their teams and their businesses. If you've got a team that are engaged and well looked after and feel safe, and more importantly, I guess, are well trained to deliver the kind of skills and the kind of products and services that we are going to need in the future, they tend to deliver a much better client experience because their own employee experience is much better. I used this analogy yesterday, it's probably not the best, but actually if you asked a fish to ride a bicycle, it would struggle. So actually, how do you give the team tools to do the job in the new world? How do you give them the skills and the expertise to look after customers who have very different expectations this March than they had last March? So it starts and ends with people, because in most businesses, it's the people that are actually delivering the experience.
Yeah, I think that's really true. And in fact, you talk about analogies. I was talking to somebody the other day who is in the probably quite unenviable position right now of being in the teaching sector. And I know, lots of sectors have got it hard, but, goodness me, people who teach for a living, they're really hard struggling at the moment. He made the point to me. He said that a lot of the teachers that he deals with, they've been teaching for 10, 20, 30, 40 years, some of them. It's like breathing to them. And he said the analogy is like scuba diving. He said if you've ever been scuba diving, what the instructor really helpfully tells you is just breathe naturally. But because every other part of your senses are screaming at you that you're in a completely alien environment, breathing naturally suddenly becomes the most unnatural thing to do. So even if you were brilliant at delivering a fantastic customer experience previously, because the world around you's changed, actually your mindset's got to change along with that. And as an employer, I'm interested, how do you kind of, I suppose, help people to foster the right kind of environment where that can continue and they can continue that? Can't get my words out.
I think I know what you mean.
The best job on behalf of their clients. Hey, proving it is live, I can't speak properly.
Well, absolutely. Leadership is a hugely important area. And again, I'd like to talk to you a little bit more about that in a minute. But actually, leadership is critical. We find that there are businesses out there that have scaled so I guess organically through COVID or through scale and growth themselves, that you find great shopkeepers, great estate agents, great solicitors who are now suddenly leading businesses of a size that they never thought was possible, and they've never really been shown how. And actually, great leaders, I'm sure you've read as many books as I've had, they tend to look after their people. Again, I'm a Tesco person through and through, and I remember Terry Leahy many years ago. I wasn't working for the company at the time. Did an article in the press that said, look, I can't look after the millions and thousands of people that shop in our shops, but I can look after the people that work there. Now, you could have a debate as to how well that's been done over recent years, but the sentiment remains the same. So I guess to answer your question, how do businesses do that? I guess they've got to start to look at themselves first and foremost. Do they have the leadership skills, and leadership capability to provide a great colleague experience, to give the team the tools to do their job? And actually, from that point of view, do they give the team the right training, the right environment, the right skill sets to go and be fantastic at looking after their colleagues and their customers?
Interesting. So when we talk about training and the right skill set and the right tools to do the job, when we're sort of talking about people having to work remotely, because that's happening an awful lot at the moment, isn't it? And we're having this conversation remotely right now. So as if to illustrate the point, what kind of skill sets are we talking about? I mean, I'm not just talking about, I guess, the practical operational skill sets. I'm also talking about that wonderful 3 pounds of organic matter that sits between our ears, which so often is our greatest asset, but equally often can be our greatest enemy because it can be that trips us up. How do we help our people with that?
I think one of my favourite expressions that I know you use an awful lot is I think George Bernard Shaw around the art of communication. I don't want to get it wrong, so be my guest. Refresh my memory.
The greatest problem with communication is the illusion that it's taken place.
The illusion.
You're absolutely right.
The illusion never took place, and I think the challenge is actually everyone's speaking and nobody's listening. So actually giving leaders and giving managers and giving teams the experience to listen puts them in a much stronger place to go and do the things that their people or their customers need. If you are a leader that's generally tapped into what your clients and your colleagues are saying, you're likely to be a much better leader because you can tailor the way you run your business to suit the needs of your colleagues or your clients. And actually, you learn an awful lot more when you're switched in and listening as well as a leader. So it's one of my favorites. I use it an awful lot, but actually the best skill that people can have is to communicate. Ask people questions, ask people uncomfortable questions that give you the truth. The truth will set you free. Another thing, again, it's dangerous to say live, but that self-pleasuring that we've talked about from time to time during training sessions, going and getting all the compliments, going and getting all the testimonials, getting yourself in a place where you're comfortable that things are going right is great, but actually it won't make your business better. The way to make your business better, I guess, is to hold the mirror up and have a look at, well, what's going wrong? Where's our weakest link? What is the single point of failure? Have I truly given all of my team the right skills, the right capabilities, rather than play Russian roulette that if you happen to get customer assistant A, it's brilliant, but actually customer assistant B is no good. Some salespeople are better than others. So again, how do you deliver that level of consistency by, I guess, listening to what people need and then providing the tools that people need to fundamentally to do their jobs, sell more stuff, and look after clients.
Absolutely. So a bit of process, a bit of consistency, and a whole lot of culture. But you mentioned there about holding a mirror up to yourself, which I'm a huge believer that the first tool in any leader's toolkit should be a mirror to look the ugly truth in the face every morning. Usually, if there's a problem in your organisation, the first place to start is by looking in the mirror, find out where that's really gone wrong. It's like when you've got a badly trained dog, isn't it? Quite often people sort of blame the dog, but they're looking at the wrong end of the lead. So that's a Royism there. That's one for Roy if you happen to be watching this, Roy. I guess the question is, what does that mirror look like? If you want to get that kind of client feedback, and I know I'm playing directly as you do for a living here, so forgive me for setting one up for you here, but what would that mirror be in reality? Oh, hello. The mirror in this case is frozen. So I'm guessing that he's going to be talking around basically being able to create good quality surveys and things. Are you back with us, Ian? I think your internet connection's gone a little bit ropey there. Again, proving that we are completely live.
Badly behaved dogs.
Yeah, that's okay. I was just asking, what would the mirror be? How do you actually hold a mirror up to your organisation?
Again, really good point. I think it definitely starts with a leader. Do I have the skills to lead this business? Am I really looking after my teams properly by, I guess, creating an environment where they feel safe, where they feel empowered, where they feel trained and capable of doing their job? And actually, as a leader, I need to create that environment through a whole range of different ways. I think then it is about listening to their teams and listening to their people. Their teams at the coalface, they typically have a far greater understanding of all the things that are wrong in your business than you could ever imagine. And actually, just by asking, you'll find out a few uncomfortable truths. It might be that the fridge is too small. It might be that they struggle to get parked. It could be that the photocopy doesn't work properly and it's a real irritant. Lots of small things that they probably don't bother senior leaders with, but it irritates them. And if it irritates them, inevitably they're not at their best, and therefore maybe they're not the best colleague or teammate, but equally they're probably not going to give the best client experience either. And then I think the final bit of that is really ask your clients what they like and what they don't like. And if you find out that there's certain things you do that they love, keep doing it and do more of it. And if you find out there is stuff that actually irritates them a little bit, stop doing it.
Bloody hell, that's radical.
It sounds so simple. It sounds so simple, and it is. But you have to be comfortable, I guess. When you put the people that are three pointing back at you, you've got to be comfortable those three are pointing back at you. You've got to be comfortable with that mirror analogy that you talked about. You've got to be comfortable that actually what you'll find if you ask these questions is you find that you actually do far more good than bad. You actually get a lot more things right than wrong. It's just that you don't really know that. So it becomes a bit of a guess. It becomes kind of feeling around the dark. But actually the truth will set you free.
I completely agree with you. It's a very, very well articulated point. And to what you just said there, I mean, like you, I come from a retail background. And I remember when I was going through my initial kind of 90-day onboarding when I was Chief Operating Officer for Ryman, I remember actually they were slightly surprised, but quite gratified, I think, because it was kind of chimed with their values as well. That one of the things I insisted on was actually going working in the stores as a store assistant. Because going and actually putting money in the tills, interacting with our customers, talking to our customers, understanding the job at a visceral level, because you don't really get it unless you're on the shop floor. Some of those things which you can't run a retail business. I don't believe you can run any business, whether it's retail or it's service industry or anything else, purely from the boardroom. You've got to talk to your clients. You've got to talk to your colleagues.
There's a great TV show, isn't there, where again senior execs have kind of gone back to the shop floor and they've had to get makeup and all sorts of prosthetics in so that nobody recognises them. And I guess they've had some really interesting insights. But you also work with several business leaders on various programs you do. So I guess from your perspective, what kind of challenges are the leaders that you're working with describing that they're going through right now?
Well, similar sorts of things, if I'm honest with you. And I guess the only problem with the sort of back to the floor title was that actually a lot of the executives who have got real problems with the ugly mirror and never looking in it, they never actually got to the floor in the first place. They wouldn't know the shop floor if it actually kind of leapt up and bit them on the bum. which unfortunately it's going to, because you've never been there. You know, you've got to know what's really happening in your business. And my observation would be that the people who have reacted and responded rather than reacted best to the kind of situation that we've seen over the course of the last year have been the ones who not only have planned well, so not that anybody had a COVID plan, nobody had a pandemic sort of toolkit, but they at least knew the levers and triggers of their business, so they were able to respond rather than simply react in a kind of fight or flight way. But they were also the ones who really truly understood their business at a proper emotional level. They really understood what the culture was really like, not just some poster that they put on the wall that says, we are passionate about this, we do that, we do the other. I mean, values are not the things that you put in the frame on the wall. Values are the things that you read every day, you know, and that's your culture. So,
and I'm sure you probably agree with this as well, but I kind of guess for businesses that are looking to thrive in the new world, that are looking to come out of lockdown, what would you see as kind of the most important things that they need to start thinking about now when planning? Because nobody knows when lockdown's going to end fully, let alone partially. I'm guessing we all think it's quite a long way into the future, but actually, what, in your opinion, do you think businesses need to start to think about now to emerge successfully from lockdown?
Well, that's a really interesting question. But the reality is that if you've got any kind of a growth mindset, you've got to remember that growth is really a euphemism for sales. Now, you can't have sales without having great people and without having great understanding of your clients as well, as you just talked about. Very, very spot on. But, I mean, ultimately, you've got to be pursuing sales, which means you've got to be feeding your pipeline. You've got to know what that pipeline of business even looks like. And part of the challenge in this whole new world from that point of view is that the way in which buyers think, and I'm particularly talking about business to business people now, so people who are in the kind of professional services or some kind of enterprise kind of selling, or even just on a one-to-one basis within SMEs, small to medium enterprises. One of the big challenges is that as we've gone into this online world, increasingly what you find is that has shone a spotlight on a number of problems that, in my view, pre-existed. They were already there, but people were getting away with it. So kind of the days of the salespeople who were kind of driving around the country, clocking up the miles, clocking up the expenses in their expense account, and being very little more than kind of a walking catalogue with a pulse and an expense account, which those days got numbered quite quickly when lockdown happened in the first place back on the 23rd of March last year, because fundamentally they couldn't get in their car and go driving anywhere, could they? Suddenly discovered that they'd been sliding a long way on bullshit. Forgive my phrase. Sorry, I probably shouldn't swear on live. But apologies for that. Apologies if I've offended anybody. But they got a long way on their charisma and their personal charm. But actually, now what you've got to do is you've got to build relationships in a virtual world, which means actually, there's a real spotlight being shone on the kind of value that they're really bringing. And McKinsey did a bit of work on this back end of last year. And I'll get the numbers slightly wrong because I'll remember it off the top of my head, but I think it's something scary in the order of like 4 out of 5 of every professional buyer that was asked said they would rather have a sales process that had no salesperson involved at all. And we're talking about large-scale enterprise sales, some of these, which is a staggering indictment of the poor quality of salesmanship that's out there.
Yeah, I think this is where there's a nice little merger, I guess, between what you do and what I do, because it sounds to me as though you're suggesting that maybe if a salesperson was to treat a prospect almost like a client experience point of view and think about what the prospect's needs are rather than getting their own met, that sounds might be a good way to move forward.
You know what, you might want something there. Think as the customer. Think through their eyes. What matters to them? The problem is when you start talking about your features, your benefits, your product, your service, your experience, your stuff. Who is it you're talking about? And it's self-measuring. It's slightly arrogant. Really. I mean, it's the old Stephen Covey thing. The 5th habit of the 7 habits of highly effective people. Seek first to understand before you seek to be understood. The stuff that is in their world. What does that look like? Not all of your stuff might fit with them. Maybe none of it does. The numbers kind of suggest that might be true. There's whatever it is, 7.8 billion people or something on the planet. Not all of them are going to be your client. Get comfortable with that number.
I think we might have also discovered maybe why certain people don't listen and do switch off, because actually if it's all about them and them and them and them, maybe prospects switch a little bit sooner than you might think, because it's easy to get bored in a conversation that's all about them.
I hate to use crude analogies. No, I don't. That's a complete lie. Of course, I love using crude analogy. The crude analogy that I would like to use in this particular instance is imagine walking up to, somebody who you find attractive in a bar, whatever your particular sort of gender or person you're attracted to, and you walk up to them and you start saying, here's my CV, here's all the stuff I do, here's what I do, here's my bank account, here's my job, I'm amazing, fantastic, and then stripping off and saying, want some of that? I mean, you could get arrested.
Never work. Yeah, but again, it's funny how these things translate, isn't it? As humans, we're all still fairly basic, and whilst there's been millions of years of evolution, actually feeling like you matter, feeling like somebody else cares, feeling like you have a voice, feeling heard, it kind of comes to life in your world and mine.
Yeah, absolutely. Feeling heard, feeling seen, feeling felt. Actually, knowing that somebody else really, is trying to walk a mile an hour moccasins a little bit and gets it. How important is that? And basic empathy. Who was it who came up? Was it Daniel Goleman who originally sort of suggested in was it the 80s or early 90s that emotional intelligence is a far greater predictor of success than actually IQ, the sort of so-called intellectual intelligence.
Yeah.
It strikes me that kind of what you do and what I do overlap in that kind of area, but certainly, we're trying to sort of codify it a little bit without kind of removing its authenticity. Does that sound right?
Absolutely. It's all about connections. You're absolutely right. And whether that's because you're trying to resolve an issue within a business, you're trying to solve a pain that somebody might be struggling with, or actually you just want to check that you're on the right track and that people are satisfied and happy and finding value in the thing that you're providing. I think there's lots of crossovers in that skill set, and it's something that people can tap into and learn. It's not something you're born with. It's not some sort of magic gift that these kind of high-flying execs tend to have. Some of it's about education, some of it's about process, some of it's about discipline and practice. But do you know what? The best way to do is to kind of dip your toe in the water and start.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you don't have all of these things in process already, don't worry about it. You've got to start somewhere, right? Put your toe in the water. Talking of water analogies, I think there's a brilliant Warren Buffett quote about, when the tide goes out, you see who was swimming naked. And I think, when you get into this kind of pandemic scenario, it's the tide going out. And really what we're seeing is quite a few people who potentially have been swimming naked. That doesn't mean that they can't sort of stop and put some swimming trunks on, and to the extent you can maybe help them do that. Thing, right?
There's a theme developing around nakedness in most of your analogies. I don't know if you picked up on it.
I don't know. Maybe I got something going on in my own brain.
It's been a long lockdown.
So I'm conscious of time here. We've got maybe sort of 5-6 minutes left before we need to wrap up.
Sure.
I just want to talk very briefly about some specific challenges that you and I have both been seeing with some of our clients and maybe some of the large companies that we've been talking to, specifically around how they have been adding to the challenges of the last 10 or 11, 12 months for all the right reasons by going through a process of consolidation. I've noticed that particularly in professional services at the moment, accountancy, some solicitors, things like that, you're seeing some firms kind of coming together. What are your observations around that? What challenges that brings?
Yeah, it's a really good point. We don't, as local sort of Stoke-on-Trent and Staffordshire people, you don't need to look too far away. But for some examples of where that's been going on for a while and where it's recently started, I guess it's interesting to see the reasons why they're doing that, and obviously they're maybe planning and looking a little bit further to the future than some of their smaller competitors, which again is all fine and dandy. I guess the biggest challenge whenever you're bringing two businesses together, I guess, will always be, well, how do we then line up behind kind of one flag? How do we bring these two potentially different cultures, potentially different ways of working, potentially different skill sets together? Now, often when businesses do come together, it's usually because they're fairly well aligned anyway. But there's always going to be some bumps and crinkles. I guess, I'd ask you the same question around bringing two businesses together from a people perspective or a leadership perspective. But from a client's point of view, it's about consistency. It's about their experience. So if two businesses come together, between them, they'll have a great way of doing some stuff. Now, it might be a bit of one and it might be a bit of the other, or one might be better than the other. It doesn't really matter. But actually, there can only really be one good way of doing it. You just have to find out what that way is. And as I say, if it's a hybrid model or yours is better than mine, I'll steal yours. It doesn't really matter. But actually, the client at the end of that experience, the client now, I guess, getting serviced by that brand or that one uniform business, it has to be seamless for them. It has to be no different at all. And if you go to any business that has multiple branches, multiple offices, multiple people, the experience has to be the same. It can't be good in some place and poor in others. So I guess bringing that together and thinking about that end user, thinking about that kind of single client view is what these businesses, I think, are working on right now. But again, same question for you from a people perspective, because that's just a bigger challenge.
I think that's right, and to your point, wherever they interact, wherever the client interacts with your business and your now newly much larger business, they've got to have an experience that they recognize as having your tone of voice and know that they feel comfortable that they're dealing with the business they thought they were dealing with. So that tone of voice, that experience, that sort of DNA has got to be there throughout. And you're right, it's a challenge. We see it in sales teams all the time, where you kind of amalgamate teams, or you recruit some new people into the team, and they come with their own way of doing things. And that's fine. Sometimes different systems, different processes can be effective. There isn't a one-size-fits-all approach in that regard, but actually having a set, I suppose, shared language, a way of working together that everybody recognizes as being, this is how we do things around here. But there is a change curve to go through with that. And I guess, where I was coming from is it always seems to me that just like when you start with, a company that's been existing for a long time, starting with a newly amalgamated larger company where you're dealing with potentially two different cultures, two different approaches, actually starting with that voice of the customer, starting with that voice of the client can be an incredibly powerful thing to do, because ultimately it doesn't really matter what you want in terms of what you do. Certainly you can dictate your why and your values, but because that's why you do what you do, right? But the voice of the customer's surely got to be the loudest voice that you hear. Not saying the customer's always right, because they demonstrably aren't, but they are at least always the customer.
They always think they are, and it's not our job to prove them wrong. It's our job to work within that framework. And again, you're right, we use a tool called customer journey mapping, where actually you can put processes down and different triggers and different events, but actually where it all comes back down to is, what's the impact on the customer? How are we making the customer feel? What are those emotions that they may well go through? And again, I guess if you are in a business where people are contacting you because they're in a state of distress, so it might be buying petrol, which nobody enjoys, or it could be asking somebody to deal with a probate issue in a professional services business, which again, nobody enjoys. If you have certain pinch points within your process, or certain people within your industry that aren't that great at dealing with those people, making somebody that's already upset, agitated, disappointed, more upset and more agitated or more disappointed is going to result in you either A, not winning the business, or losing it fairly quickly. So trying to understand the impact that you're having on people, and I guess changing the way you work to make that better is never a bad place to start.
Absolutely, but that is absolutely a fantastic place to finish. We are coming up on the top of our half hour here, Ian. Right. We say we keep it to a nice tight half hour, so an upfront track that we've stuck to. Who knew that could be a thing as well? So, how can people get hold of you, Ian? What's the best way of getting hold of you?
Best way to get hold of me, again, variety of ways, as we've all got LinkedIn, Ian Kelsall profile, Twitter, Ian Kelsall CXD. Or again, often the best way is the old way. Who knew that phone calls were going to be the old way? But 07786 657 544, or alternatively, I am Ian.Kelsall at insightsix.com.
Absolutely fantastic. Thank you very much indeed. And for anybody who wants to get hold of me, if you're watching this, there's a good chance you're already connected to me on LinkedIn. If you're not, then please do reach out and connect. I'd be happy to have a connection with you. My name is Matthew Dashper-Hughes. Not an easy name to spell, but don't worry, the email address is damn sight easier. Just use the initials mdh@sandler.com. And my mobile number is 07715 269 724. And please do also like and follow the Growth Practice page on LinkedIn, because Ian and I work together as part of a collective of professionals who work in this kind of space. And if this is a well-liked kind of activity, well, we might just be doing this kind of thing on a weekly basis. Not always me and Ian, but actually maybe some of our other colleagues as well will also be doing this. So thank you very much, Ian. It's the top of the hour. We'll see you soon.
Great. Thanks, Matthew. Take care.